Welcome to Ready to Heal. I'm your host, Betsy Sawyer Galen, and today my guest is Scott Gillet. Thank you for coming today, Scott. I wanted to just have you introduce all of your titles, all the hats you wear. So why don't you do that? I think it's going to be easier.
Thank you for inviting me, Betsy, and thank you folks out there for tuning in today. And I hope that you're all well. I'm Scott Gillet, Director of the Briarcliff Institute for Recovery and Development, what we call BIRD. I'm the author of a book called True Bud.
Right here.
Which is a regular paperback on Amazon, but was just rewritten and is revised and much better as an ebook, which will come up in the graphics where you can get the ebook, the Kindle version of True Bud. I am a marital and family therapist and a certified nutrient therapist for trauma, mental health, and addiction, a relatively new field, trained by a place called the Alliance for Addiction Solutions, which is a fantastic organization that is involved in training clinicians to look at brain chemistry along with all the other aspects of therapy. So we do family systems work, we work with a lot of young people with various issues, but now we are working with brain chemistry, which is a huge piece that we felt was missing for many years. So that's who I am.
Okay, that sounds great. I wanted to just ask you a little bit about your own path. Like how did you get started doing this? You've been doing it for many years now, and you've kind of branched out using different types of therapies over the years.
Mm-hmm. Well, my mother was a yoga teacher for 60 years, so I grew up in an environment that was very different than most kids. You know, I woke up in the morning and she was standing on her head for 15 minutes.
Were you from Westchester, or were you around here?
Yeah, born in the Bronx, Yonkers, and then New Rochelle. And she grew sprouts in the kitchen. Sprouts are all over the place, and she was mostly vegetarian and was very tuned to, back then, like people like Gary Knoll, you know, who was like a pioneer in this, Pfeiffer, Dr. Pfeiffer. She knew about all these people. So doors were opened, and I became pretty young, I became a yoga teacher in my 20s, and then became a social worker, you know, and started seeing people with all types of issues. I worked in many different settings, oncology, social work. I worked at Sing Sing Prison with people who were dying. I worked at the Center for Family Learning, which trained family therapists.
Where is that?
That's in Rybrook now. They used to be in New Rochelle. That was started by Murray Bowen, who invented family therapy out of the Georgetown University Family Studies program. And I was really fortunate at that time. I was a videographer, photographer, and I was videoing Murray Bowen and Dr. Philip Guerin and Dr. Tom Fogarty, who were the directors of the center. So it was kind of like a satellite of the family studies program that Murray Bowen started. This is called Bowenian Family Systems Theory. So, but over a long period of time, I noticed that you could work with the family system, you could work with the individual, you could use all kinds of models like CBT, interventions, you know, interpersonal models, psychodrama, but there were some people that clearly had brain chemistry issues. And
you found that out early on working
with
people?
And because of how I grew up, I realized that, you know, when you're working with someone mind, body, spirit.
Right.
And mind is more than just thought. Mind is also how the brain is working.
Right.
And I started to think, you know, some of these people are going and moving towards psychopharmacology, things like, you know, Xanax and Prozac and SSRIs for these conditions that seem to be an imbalance in the brain.
Right.
And I started to wonder what could be causing so many imbalances in the brain, especially in younger people.
I wanted to ask you too, like, as you were, did you feel a calling always to help people? Did you have some, you know, personal situation that led you to want to be working in this way?
No, I was a photographer and really good at it and making a lot of money as a photographer.
So that's how you were trained originally?
Yeah,
No,
and I was
interesting.
videoing sessions at the Center for Family Learning.
Uh-huh.
And Murray Bowen said to me, you know where to go with the camera before I sometimes know where to go myself with the therapy.
Uh-huh.
And he said, you should become a family therapist. And I never really thought about it, honestly. But they kind of pressured me into it over there. They didn't force me into it.
Pressured you.
They
Interesting.
moved me in that direction, and they were very, very good to me. They actually put me through the whole training program.
Wow.
I didn't have to pay, and Dr. Fogarty, Dr. Gurren were very good to me, and all I had to do was some video work, and they put me through the training program. That's a postgraduate training program, like sort of like a doctorate in family systems.
Uh-huh.
So I had already had to go back to college. Then I had to go back to social work, get a graduate degree in social work school, and then this is postgraduate work that comes after you go to graduate school.
Right.
And I did this really quickly. Plus I was married and had young kids at that time. So it was a really magical time.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So tell me, what kind of, at this point you've been doing this for now, you established a center.
Mm-hmm. The Institute,
in
Briarcliff
Briarcliff?
Institute, yep.
And how long has that been in place?
About 35 years we've been working. 35 years now.
And what all do you cover there? What are your, like, say somebody needed help and they didn't know where to go. What would you do for them at the center?
So
what kind of things?
we would begin with an evaluation, pretty thorough, you know. We would look at the family system. We would look at the interpersonal issues. We would look at relationships. We would look at brain chemistry. We would look at the source.
And how do you look at brain chemistry? How do you do that?
What we use is there's many models. It's a great, excellent question. How do you look at brain chemistry? So we don't have access to MRI scans and to phototechnon techniques. That will be the wave of the future, I think, in mental health, that brain scans will become more and more popular. So we're using questionnaires.
Oh, how can you see the chemistry of a brain from a brain scan?
You know, you would really have to ask a doctor that. I'm not a doctor.
But they have that capability.
Yes, Dr. Amen, who's done a lot of work with ADD, has the highest volume of brain scans of ADD kids, several thousand. Many of those are marijuana users. He has a large amount of brain scans that do look different. The marijuana users look different, their brain scans, than the regular kids. And the ADD kids look different than the regular kids.
Oh, that's interesting. Have you seen them? Have you studied them at all?
I've seen some of them. I've seen some of the brain scans.
And how do they differ? Are there...
Gray matter, you know, there's huge impact in the gray and white matter of the brain from heavy chemical users, such as marijuana smokers. There's many changes in the brain.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. I can only tell you about the testing that we've done on our kids around brain chemistry, which really is this thing that I call toxic marijuana syndrome. All these kids looked exactly the same in receptor activity and in levels of toxicity such as copper, mercury, aluminum, lead, cadmium, manganese. Lots of metals were in these kids. They all were chronic weed smokers, and several of them used a new form of weed called dabs, wax, butter, which you need what's called a rig for. That's a butane tank that a welder would use in welding metals for sculptures or working on bridges.
Wow.
Or iron buildings with a mask on and a whole outfit and gloves.
Oh my goodness.
But not these young kids. They get this marble piece of wax and put it on a nail and they heat it up with a rig. Sometimes it's an electric rig, sometimes it's a rig that you can get on Amazon easily that's butane with a copper tube. So that copper is going to get hot. The nail, whether it's ceramic or metal that the wax is on, is going to get hot. And then what's in the wax is going to get really hot. So that's like what I call a 1-2-3 punch. The rig, the copper, the butane, the wax, the nail. So many sources of toxicity are coming in at once.
Wow. So let me ask you a question, because that's that's totally outside the realm of my own idea, my own notion of somebody smoking marijuana. So,
Right,
like
right.
how
Yes, I
how
can't see you
common?
smoking dabs of wax, Betsy.
I can't even really picture the whole thing. It sounds like such a huge operation. Like, are a lot of people doing that?
Yeah, a lot of young people are doing it. Some are consuming 600 to 800
Where do they get all these
milligrams.
things? It sounds like they need like a lot of
Amazon, the wax and the rigs are all
pieces
sold
and
on Amazon and sites all over the place. They are consuming 600 to 800 milligrams of THC a day. Some young people. Do you realize how much that is? When we were growing up, you know, because I'm fairly sure you're as young as I am. So when we were growing up, you know, marijuana was maybe 11, 12% THC. Maybe it got to 18 when they had Thai sticks and Colombian. If you were lucky, it got to 20. Now most marijuana leaf form is at 26 to 30%, and dabs and wax is up to 95% THC.
wow,
When kids smoke that, often they can't get off the couch. They can't do much. They don't even want to have sex.
wow, that's wow.
Imagine adolescents not wanting to have sex.
So is this common? I mean, do you find this type of thing common in Westchester, for example?
Yes, I find it common, and I have found that in many young people, it has something to do with the current epidemic of heroin that we're seeing now, that the brain has been changed so much. The regulation part of the brain, like where the brakes are, you know, we have a set of brakes in us in the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
That's where decision making is, and there
Right.
should be a stop sign. So if they move to other substances, they lack the brakes and the stop sign to stop that some other kids may have. Marijuana changes that in the brain. So in that way, you could call it a gateway drug. You see, this has nothing to do with peer pressure. We're always focused on peer pressure as the reason why young people use substances, but that's really not the issue. It has a lot to do
It's
with brain
part of it, though, right?
chemistry.
It is part of it, certainly.
I don't feel it has anything to do with it. No, I don't. I never had a kid come in and say, another kid forced me to do this.
But
or
it's
try
not. But
this."
it's more subtle than that, I think.
I never even had a kid come in and say, you know, I just did it because I wanted to be part of the group of cool. What I have kids saying is, I needed a layer of insulation around me in that social setting.
Yeah.
I did not feel comfortable in my own skin. So I needed some insulation, and that substance, whatever it was, offered me insulation.
Yeah.
Or I didn't feel good about myself, or I had to layer up. That's really what I hear kids saying. I don't ever hear kids saying they were pushed or forced into using
Yeah.
substances.
Well, this is interesting because I know you're talking about the heroin epidemic, which, you know, every time I hear about, and I'm from Ohio originally, I know Ohio has a huge epidemic, and
Right.
I keep,
Methamphetamine too.
yeah,
out there.
and I keep wondering about, you know, that, and it sounds like you know a lot about that. I keep wondering why that's happening because, you know, people I know, their children, and there's no reason that we can understand why they would look to that even in the first place. And then please shed some light on whatever you know about that.
Yeah, it's a sad thing because many young people are dying. You know, there's a young person we work with who's in recovery from heroin for a while, who has lost 13 very good close friends to heroin overdoses who have died. That's 13 people in a certain area of Westchester County that, you know, I don't want to mention and go into. I don't want to make one town worse than the other, but they're dying because of a specific reason. They really don't know how to use the drug. No one's taught them how to use heroin. They use in isolation and on their own.
And where are they getting it? Are they getting that from their friends? Are they getting it?
Easy access, very easy access. In all the communities, it's very easy to get heroin. It used to be years ago you had to go into Harlem or the Bronx. You had to take risks. Needles were not readily available. Now needles you can go into any drugstore and buy for $1. So they have access to needles really easily. addicts had to share needles back in the 60s and 70s. But in sharing needles, addicts taught other addicts how to use the drug safely so they would not die. So not that many people died back then. Also, the drug was not cut with fentanyl back then. You know, it may be that once in a while a hot bag came out and it was strong, but addicts kind of knew how to do that from being taught by other addicts. Now, I'm not saying we should open a school and teach these young people how to use the drug, but we have to go to some out-of-the-box drastic measure. And in certain parts of the country, they are opening centers where addicts can come and get fresh needles, counseling, and use heroin there and be shown how to use it safely. And law enforcement does not
And where is this
them.
happening?
This is the lead program in Seattle. The Baltimore mayor is trying to open a center up because so many people are dying in Baltimore. And the Ithaca mayor was trying to open a center and get legislation for it to go through. So this is where police participate with counselors, and the goal is to get these addicts into treatment for them not to die. So they're taught how to use the drug safely. They're in a safe setting. They get lots of other services that may have to do with HIV, hepatitis C, you know, fresh needles that would prevent that. But the ultimate goal is getting close enough to them to engage them into treatment.
Right. I want to ask you, because the thought came to me.
The final piece of that is Don Winslow is a great author. He wrote Savages, the movie and book Savages. So he had an article in Esquire magazine this past August. And it's a great article, goes into the whole drug epidemic, and he said very clearly something that I have felt for a long time. The legalization of marijuana has contributed to the heroin epidemic because the cartels lost that product. And like any business, when you lose a product that's not selling, you move in with another product that's going to take over it and sell. And they make fentanyl cheaply and easily, and they just started adding fentanyl to heroin, because heroin, you have to grow these large poppy fields. Fentanyl, all you need is a chemist who knows what they're doing in a small building in Mexico City. So the cartels are now using fentanyl.
And is that where most of it's coming from, Mexico?
Oh, yeah. Many other sources, but Mexico. But many of the cartels exist in Mexico.
So the thought that came to me when we were talking about this before is, so obviously your facility deals with a lot of drug addiction, a lot of young people. How do they know to come there? What brings
most
them?
Most of it's a word of mouth thing. Kids trust us.
Do you work with any schools or organizations,
schools,
or how do you?
You know, just over the years, lots of different referral sources. But we are not a drug addiction or drug abuse agency. We're not. It's just that young people come, and sometimes that's a presenting problem. We are a holistic, intensive outpatient program, probably the only holistic intensive outpatient program that can do brain chemistry work, that can do nutrient therapy, that can do family therapy, that can do spiritual therapy, that can do marital work, individual work, work on depression, work on anxiety, and if substance use and abuse falls out from some of those things, we could deal with that. We used to send a lot of kids away to treatment, but the success rate for inpatient treatment is very low. Many of those kids just ended up relapsing again.
Yeah.
So we felt that dealing with brain chemistry and using nutrient therapy to really enhance and feed their brains so their brains would feel normal and they wouldn't have such high levels of craving would really help over time, and our young people have proven that.
Well, say you're a mom or a dad with a kid who you may know, or you may just sense they have a drug issue. How would you go about getting to you or finding a way to bring them? Is there do you have a way that you work with kids? It sounds like you've had a lot of success, and you instill a lot of trust.
Yeah,
and that's really important, especially for something like this,
No, I would agree with you. I mean, that is a real miracle that Bird has been able to create this level of trust where kids bring other kids in.
I was going to say that,
with group a couple of
they
kids
find
are
they're
just
getting
there that
some
I don't even
relief.
know that some of the other young people have brought them there. You know, we have a dog, Shanti. The dog is very engaging. I think Shanti might be better at therapy than me at times. I don't know. He
Dogs
goes
are.
right
They
to
are.
the kid that is in the most trouble and singles them out or her
Yeah.
out. But, you know, the parent would sit down with them and say, listen, I love you. I care about you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to punish you. This is about us making you whole, joyful, and allowing you to be the human being you were meant to be. So we want to go to this place, and it doesn't have to be our place. It could be whatever place, you know, that offers healing and help. We want you to go to this place because we really feel that you're in trouble, you know, and at least go and check it out. So once a kid walks through our doors, you know, they're treated with a lot of respect and a lot of love.
Do most of them come through their parents, or do they come by themselves?
Parents, through friends, sometimes through one of the counselors in the school, sometimes through a psychiatrist, sometimes through a psychologist. Sometimes they come at a treatment program and end up with us, or a hospital like Four Winds or Silver Hill, New York Hospital. There's many ways that people get to us. But I gotta say, over the years, from witnessing our population, we do end up with pretty motivated young people. I mean, 6 to 8 of them were willing to be in this study around marijuana and be tested for recepticide activity and metal toxicity, something that no one in the country has done until we started doing it. And then they were willing to go on nutrients and be guinea pigs to see if these nutrients would help. And we had a lot of support from doctors that really, you know, being I'm not a medical doctor, I had to draw on doctors who lent their hands to this toxic marijuana syndrome project so we could really treat these kids once we found the toxicity and the lower recepticide activity.
Right. Well, I'm wondering, like, is there any pain involved in being, you know, having a scan done? Or
No,
is there,
no,
how does
it's
that?
hair. No, I got pretty good at this over time, just clipping a little hair from the back of the girls are a little. The girls are a little more, you know, don't take that off. But I got pretty good at clipping a little hair. And then
so you just cut a little,
urine
you just
and
cut
hair.
a little bit of hair. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We did urine and hair. For forensic testing, it had to be done through the state of Connecticut because actually it's not legal in New York.
Oh,
Hair
interesting.
testing is not legal in New York because of 9/11 and so many claims going in. At least that's what I think. That's all I was able to find out about hair testing.
So when you see a kid, sometimes you were telling me earlier that sometimes you just have a sense that there's like the metal. It's not in everybody, but it's in a lot.
Right, but I do.
How do you get a sense of that?
I do use Julia Ross, who wrote The Mood Cure, and will be coming out with a book about sugar addiction called The Sugar Cure in December. She came up with an amino acid chart, a questionnaire that went over each receptor site. So if there's lower, and then I came up with a chart just for young people. I took her chart and kind of rewrote it and made it much more friendly for young people. So we use both charts, depending on who we're seeing, adults or young people. When recepticide activity is really off, you also have to look at metal toxicity. So there really are signs of metal toxicity that would happen in the evaluation with the person through the interview, like headaches, like aggression, like loss of motivation. Our heavy weed smoking kids all had the same symptoms. So it was really easy to look at because they were all exactly the same.
And what are the symptoms then?
They had anger, conflict with parents. They had failure to thrive. They couldn't get off to college. If they were in college, they dropped out. They had respiratory issues. They had gastrological issues. They had some anxiety and depression. All of those symptoms of toxic marijuana syndrome are in the book here. I'm not going to go over every single one, but the symptoms and causes of why they have it and what caused it are in the toxic marijuana syndrome chapter. Our job was to get the toxins out and to regulate recepticide activity and restore them. They had to be willing to stop smoking bud, weed, for a period of time so we could treat them with nutrient therapy. And doctors came up with the plan. I did not put the nutrient plan together. Although I had ideas and suggestions, I allowed the doctors at the nutrient companies to put it together. And they did all that for free. They didn't charge us a dime. We didn't charge any of the people for testing. We got a grant from a family member of my father, and we did all this testing for free. Not just the kids at Bird, but control groups out there.
Oh. So how long does the whole, and I would imagine it varies from person to person, but how long would a treatment program typically take? What would you...
It does vary from person to person, but we don't really like keeping young people in treatment forever, you know? This seems to be the trend today, that young people go away and they start for a month if they're going away to a place, and they end up going away for a year, you know, to wilderness programs, to therapeutic boarding schools. We started this trend of sending all these young people away because we felt we couldn't handle them. But really, if you change their brains, the rest is really easy. If you support their brains for what they really need and reduce craving or reduce anger or reduce metals, the rest is really easy if they trust
Well, and
you.
some of them probably do have family situations or personal situations that are not conducive to, you know, healing, and I can see how it might make sense.
I have to stop you. I can't.
Oh, okay.
A family member that, parents that feel they have to send their kid away, you know, they have to look closely at their parenting. Because that says to a kid, I can no longer parent you. I don't have the skills to parent you. How does a parent get to a place where they lost the skills to parent a kid?
I guess I'm thinking about kids who maybe don't have their parents there, or who are in more extreme situations where they really don't have a support system.
Like inner city kids?
Yeah, or people, right, people who don't have a support system, really.
The community kind of parents them. You know, it's a very, very different environment, and that's not really Bird's environment, although I've been to that environment and know what it's about, and it's more of community parenting.
I'm going to ask you right now, because we're at the end of our time, if you would come back and continue this conversation with me. Would you be willing to do that? Awesome.
Sure, we'll do like Volume 1, like Kill Bill Volume 1, Kill Bill Volume 2.
Absolutely, and I just want to say thank you again, Scott Gillet, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again on Ready to Heal, and we will continue this conversation at the next show. Thanks a lot.